Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. This is the first lecture in the series of lectures on history of English literature. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the very first age, Anglo-Saxon period or Old English period, that stretches over 600 years from 450 to 1066. Specifically, this lecture deals with the origin of English language and Anglo-Saxon literature. Let's try to trace the origin of English language. You know, it is the power that determines language. The relation of power and language has been very intimate. The powerful imposes his own language. In ancient times before Christ, there were no national boundaries. There were just tribes and groups of people living on various patches of land. And then there were wars, battles. Whoever won the war occupied the land, ruled, and ultimately imposed his own language. The same is the story of English as a language. In ancient times, before Christ, the island of England was governed by two tribes, Celts and Gaels. The language of Celts was Celtic, and the language of Gaels was Gaelic, which is still spoken in some parts of Ireland. These two tribes were not powerful. They were weak and were not in a position to defend their island of England. England at that time was also known as Britain. Celts were known as Britons, therefore the land was called Britain. The Romans' invasion of Britain. About 1st century BC, the island of England was attacked by the Romans. In the course of his Gallic wars, Julius Caesar, a very known figure, invaded Britain twice, in 55 and 54 BC, and consequently made Britain the part of his Roman Empire. The Romans came to Britain looking for riches, land, slaves, and most of Britain's metal. The Romans continued to rule the province of Britain up to 5th century. The language of Romans was Latin. The earlier languages, were Celtic and Gaelic, which were spoken and not yet written, because the writing came very late. The Romans imposed their own language, that was Latin, and it became the official language of Britain. Latin was also the language of Christianity, so it became the most influential language of all the Europe. Hadrian's Wall. It's also important for you to know about Hadrian's Wall, why it was constructed. Picts, a tribe or group of people from northern Scotland, they were Celtic-speaking people. They were continuously attacking Britain. Hadrian, the emperor of Rome, constructed a defensive wall known as Hadrian's Wall, or the Roman Wall, or Picts' Wall, in 122 AD to keep the Picts away from Britain. It helped to protect Britain from Picts for 300 years. The end of Roman rule in Britain. In 410 AD, the Romans left Britain. The Roman Emperor Honorius sent a goodbye letter to the people of Britain. He wrote, "Fight bravely and defend your lives. You are on your own now." Actually, the city of Rome was under attack and the empire was falling apart. So, the Romans had to leave to take care of their own matters. The Romans left, but their culture and language influenced the province of Britain. Then, in 450 AD, Britain was again invaded, and this time by Germanic tribes, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Some sources say that they were invited to come to help the Britons as Picts were again attacking. Another reason may be that these Germanic tribes came because their land was often flooded and it was difficult to grow crops. So they were looking for new places to settle down and farm. However, when these northern tribes, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes came, they brought their own languages, the dialects of German language, and these dialects became the official language of Britain. The birth of English language. Out of these dialects and motherly Latin language, English language was born. So we can say English is a mixture, an amalgam of the dialects spoken by Angles, Saxons and Jutes and Latin language. Unlike others, these Germanic tribes settled there in Britain, and their language, culture and literature became the heritage of England. That is how the whole thing came up. That is how English language originated. Growth of English language. Growth of English language can be traced in three periods: Old, Middle and Modern. The period of Old English is from 450 to 1066. The period of Middle English is between 1066 and 14th century. Modern English comes after 14th century. It is interesting to note, why is it called Anglo-Saxon period? Because Angles and Saxons were the two powerful tribes of Britain from 450 to 1066. It is also very important for you to know what type of literature was written during this period. Anglo-Saxon poetry includes heroic poems, religious poems, personal poems, poetry of wisdom, love poems, whereas Anglo-Saxon prose includes chronicles, sermons, hagiography, translation of Bible from Latin, and riddles. Alliterative poetry. During that time, alliterative poetry was written. At that time, there was no rhyme scheme and meter. There were only alliterative words. Alliterative rhythm comes out of your pace of breathing and heartbeat. So, this was the source of rhythm. Therefore, all the poems of Anglo-Saxon Old English period were written in unrhymed alliterative words. If you are a student of English literature, you must know that there are 4 manuscripts of Anglo-Saxon literature. Number 1, the Worsley Book. It is an anthology of Old English prose and verse. Number 2, the Junius Manuscript. It contains poetry dealing with biblical subjects. Number 3, the Exeter Book. It is also very important manuscript. It is an anthology of Old English poetry or Anglo-Saxon poetry. And number 4, the Beowulf Manuscript or Novel Codex. It is the most famous manuscript as it contains the unique copy of the epic poem Beowulf. Due to the fame of Beowulf, the Novel Codex is also sometimes known simply as the Beowulf Manuscript. In addition to this, it contains first a fragment of the life of Saint Christopher, then the more complete texts, Wonders of the East and Letters of Alexander to Aristotle. Now, let's try to know about the 5 most important writers of Anglo-Saxon literature. Number 1, Bede. Bede was the first poet of Old English period in 8th century. He is also known as Saint Bede, the Venerable Bede, and Bede the Venerable. He was an English monk. He is well known as an author, teacher, and scholar. Bede's death song is the editorial name given to a 5-line Old English poem, supposedly the final words of the Venerable Bede. His most famous work, Ecclesiastical History of the English People, gained him the title the Father of English History. He wrote in Latin, so we cannot call him the poet of English language. Number 2, Caedmon. Caedmon was the first one who actually wrote in English, in Old English. He was a monk and a Christian poet. It is said that he was originally ignorant of the art of song, but learned to compose one night in the course of a dream. Caedmon's only known surviving work is Caedmon's Hymn. It was the 9-line alliterative vernacular praise poem in the honor of God, which he reportedly learned to sing in his initial dream. Then came the followers of Caedmon, who were very excited to write in Old English. Their poetry is known as Caedmon's followers. Number 3, Kenilworth. He is the second great important poet of Old English. He is the author of 4 long poems: The Fates of Apostles, Juliana, Alani, and the most important, Christ, which is a metrical narrative of leading events of Christ's ministry upon earth, including his return to judgment with much grandeur. Exeter Book, a collection of poems, is attributed to Kenilworth and his followers. Number 4. Alfred the Great. He was the glorious king of Wessex. He translated a number of Latin chronicles into English. He has translated the first 50 psalms, 3 prose works, and Cadman's hymn. He was also the writer of some wisdom poems. He also ordered to teach English to students, Old English to students. English prose was born in 9th century with Alfred the Great. During his rule, Bible was translated for the first time into English. Before this, whoever tried to translate Bible was sentenced to death. Number 5. Alfric. He was a priest who wrote sermons in a sort of poetic prose. So that is all about the important writers of Anglo-Saxon literature. Now, let's turn to the 5 most important poems of Anglo-Saxon period. Number 1. Wordsworth. Wordsworth is also known as the Traveller's Song. It is an Old English poem of 143 lines. It describes continental courts visited in imagination by a far-wandering poet. It is an autobiography of a scoop. The poem survives only in the Exeter Book. The poem is, for the most part, a survey of the people, kings, and heroes of Europe in the heroic age of Northern Europe. Number 2. Walder. It is the story of Walder of Aquitaine and Haldit, who fall in love and steal treasure from the court of Attila, where they were held hostage. It tells how Walder withstood a host group of foes in the passes of Vosges. In one fragment, someone encourages Walder to go on fighting. In the other, there is a praise of a sword followed by Walder's praise of his own. The first portion is a speech given by Haldit trying to motivate Walder for his upcoming fight. The second fragment consists mainly of Walder challenging and taunting Gothair, the king. Number 3. The Fight at Finnsburg. This poem or fragment of poem deals with the theme of battle against fearful odds. The fragment is only about 50 lines long. It describes a battle in which Hanif, elsewhere known as a Danish prince, is attacked at a palace called Finnsburg. The fragment begins with Hanif's observation that what he sees outside is the torches of approaching attackers. Hanif and his 60 retainers hold the doors for 5 days without any falling. Then a wounded warrior turns away to talk to his chief, and the fragment ends. Neither the cause nor the outcome of the fight are described. Number 4. Complaint of Doer. This poem is also titled as Doer or The Lament of Doer. It is an Old English poem found in the late 10th century collection, the Exeter Book. The poem consists of 42 alliterative lines. It describes the disappointment of a lover. In the poem, Doer's lord has replaced him. Doer mentions various figures from Germanic mythology and reconciles his own troubles with the troubles these figures faced, ending each section with the refrain, "That passed away, so may this." The poem Doer begins with the struggles and misfortunes of a character named Valand. Number 5. Beowulf. It is the 8th century alliterative epic, having 3,182 lines. It is one of the most important works of Old English literature. It is also known as National Epic of England. The poem survives in a single copy in the manuscript known as the Novell Codex. The story is set in Scandinavia in the 6th century. Beowulf is the hero who comes to help Hrothgar, the king of the Danes, whose hall has been under attack by a monster known as Randall. After Beowulf slays him, Randall's mother attacks the hall and is then also defeated. Victorious Beowulf goes home and becomes king of the Geats. 50 years later, Beowulf defeats a dragon but is mortally wounded in the battle. It is important to note that he kills in the first part a monster and in the second part a dragon. Dragon is a symbol of China that actually refers to Asia. Monster refers to Africa. It means this Western hero, Beowulf, conquers both the continents, Asia and Africa, symbolically. Consciously or unconsciously, it was in the mind of Europeans. They wanted to conquer the world. So that is all about the Anglo-Saxon literature. So I hope this lecture would be helpful for the students of English language and literature. Thank you for listening to this lecture. Stay blessed.